Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
Pollster and host of the Political Trade Secrets podcast, Dustin Olson.
Dustin Olson.
Dustin Olson.
And Dustin Olson, pollster at American Polls. They work for both Republicans and Democrats. And he hosts a podcast, Political Trade Secrets. Oh, we love that. We like that podcast.
Now, from Washington, D.C., is pollster Dustin Olson.
And welcome to the show. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here on Political Trade Secrets, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and show you how politics actually works, the forces driving public opinion, and many other things. If you'd like the show, please follow us, like and subscribe on Apple, on Spotify, on YouTube, wherever you enjoy premium podcasts. We'd love to have you follow us. And today we're going to be talking about the 2025 elections, the off-year elections happening in states across the country. Your local area might be having a municipal election, maybe for mayor or for school board. A lot of places are having elections, but there are a few places that are having what are definitely more interesting and possibly elections that could have a little bit of some tea leaf message for what's going to happen in 2026. So we're going to be looking at those places like Virginia, New York City, which we've done lots of polling in, New Jersey, California, and even Pennsylvania has some important races. So we'll be talking about all of that today on the show. Of course, if you are interested in learning more about our polling, you can go to pollingclub.com to get further insights. People there, they get to help determine what questions we ask. We've been doing a number of surveys in New York City, and we've gotten a number of our questions and suggestions from reporters as well as polling club members. And we really do appreciate all of our wonderful members who support what we're doing and also suggest great ideas. So with that, I really appreciate everybody being here. And we're going to go into our first just kind of overall what I see is happening. So it's interesting. In the odd years, typically following a presidential election, we see a reaction to whatever happened in the presidential election. So, for instance, in a place like, in 2021, we had Governor Youngkin won in Virginia. It was a big win. Virginia is a purple to blue state. That was a big deal. In New Jersey, we had Ciattarelli, who's running again. Ciattarelli got very close, almost won that election in very blue New Jersey. So we had Eric Adams, of course, won in New York City. He was a slightly, I guess, more conservative candidate than the other options in that election. But we saw that there was a reaction to Joe Biden having won that 2020 election. And we had just had in late July, early August, the collapse of Afghanistan, which, if you look at the polling, was clearly the moment that Joe Biden really lost support and never recovered from that point on. His presidency was over at that moment. So this is the typical way things go, and then we go into a midterm election, which is almost always so the party that's out of the power in the White House in that presidential election, then going into the off-year elections, and then going into the midterm elections, almost always that party that's out of power does pretty well. 2008, we had a big win for Barack Obama, and that was when Chris Christie in 2009 was able to win for governor of New Jersey. So this is how it typically goes. But it's interesting, we're seeing things really not looking like that currently across the country. And I want to bring up something that I think is part of what is going on here. So in Semaphore, it's a decent website to check out and look at some of these articles. David Weigel has an article right now from a group called Welcome, which is a center-left group that is trying to get the Democrat Party back on the rails. So it's my belief that we need to have at least two prominent, strong parties in this country, a loyal opposition. Right now, that's not what we're really seeing. We're seeing in polling right now, Donald Trump is doing better in his second term as far as his approval goes compared to President Bush or to President Obama. And for this century, he's doing the best as far as that goes. So that's on him. But then when we look at party approval, the Republicans, parties aren't that popular generally, but they're at a -12 net favorability. That's not like fantastic, but that is, that's to be expected. Democrats are at -24. That is even worse approval than what we saw for Joe Biden when he was forced to leave the presidential race last year. So this is where the Democrat Party is, and you can see we're going to talk about New York City here in a minute. New York City is about to elect a Democratic Socialist as mayor, and really with that is going to be the culmination of the transformation of that party. So there are people within the party. I know a number of people who are working to try to blunt that. We help people across the country in municipal races in particular to try to make sure that more pro-business, pro-free market Democrats win as opposed to the Democratic Socialists. So where there's no Republican that could possibly win, getting somebody who's not crazy. So Semaphore has this article, David Weigel, this group Welcome. They surveyed I think hundreds of thousands of people over the last 6 months, finding out what they think about the Democrat Party. And it's interesting. I believe it's 70% say that the Democrat Party is out of touch. So that's a pretty big deal, and that they are focused more on things like fighting climate change, protecting the rights of LGBTQ plus. Mostly that's talking about the trans issue. Than they are on issues that more people care about, like securing the border or lowering the rate of crime. So this is the backdrop of what we're seeing going into this election year, when you should see a huge surge of support for Democrats in places like New Jersey, Virginia, New York City. And to be clear, there's going to be some wins for Democrats in this off-year election. California right now, we'll talk about that in a little bit. They have this ballot initiative, Prop 50, that Gavin Newsom is pushing to focus on what they really want to have is just gerrymandering for the midterm elections, and that is likely going to pass at this point. So there are going to be some wins, and in New Jersey and in New York City and in Virginia, you're going to see some Democrats win. The biggest thing, though, is that we're not seeing in these blue areas a big surge. Now, tomorrow we're going to be on Inside Sources. If you go to insidesources.com, or if you go to my X feed, it's at Dustin Olson. You can and go there, click the little alarm, the little bell, get notified when we post things. But I'll be posting an op-ed, just doing an overall, explanation of what's going on in these off-year elections, talking about each of these issues that we're talking about right now. So anyway, it's interesting. I think this is a worthwhile article to go check out, because it explains a little bit of what we're seeing as far as what's happened. One thing that's interesting that it brings up is there's an article or a paper back in 1989 called The Politics of Evasion, which inspired the Democrat Party shift to the more centrist candidates like Bill Clinton. A 70-page document that made the case for what they needed to do to break with the party's more unpopular orthodoxies. And it seems like this group is attempting to do that today, and we'll see how well it goes. But clearly the die is cast, and we'll be talking about how that's happened in all these different places. And in Virginia in particular, the Attorney General having discovered that he was sending violent text messages wishing the assassination of one of his political opponents, and for his wife to be, for the wife of his political opponent to hold their dead children in her arms. That is just beyond the pale. But I will tell people, if you get nothing else from this, if you're in Virginia, that race is shifted significantly, and we have early voting in this state. People were voting before that ever came to light, so it is still possible that Jay Jones, the horrendous, horrible, and at moments at least had evil thoughts candidate for attorney general, could still win. I mean, it's still a close race, and it has definitely changed the dynamic in that race. But you can't take that for granted. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to a great segment I did with Charlotte McBride and guest host Charles Marino, who were on Wake Up America, and I was on with the great John Zogby. If you know the Zogby poll, he was a pollster for many decades, and we talked about just overall what's going on in all these races.
Turning now to the campaign trail, where candidates are on their final lap with Election Day right around the corner in several key states.
Let's bring in our panel. Dustin Olson, pollster at American Pulse Research and host of the Political Trade Secrets podcast, and John Zogby, founder of John Zogby Strategies.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning to both of you. So New Yorkers appear to be barreling toward a future under Mayor Mamdani. It's hard to say that out loud. Zohran Mamdani, though, has an 18-point lead. We are 11 days from Election Day. Dustin, bottom line, is this race already decided?
Well, it looks like it probably is already decided, though. I have to say that there is definitely a coalition of people who are keeping Mamdani from getting to 50%. It's very clear to me. It's interesting, in the off-year elections right now, you should see the blue states of New Jersey and Virginia and the extremely blue New York City voting for the Democratic candidates in big numbers because we have a Republican in the White House. But in each of these, we don't see that. And in New York City, really, if you could put together the Cuomo vote and the Sliwa vote, it's definitely, they do have more support. And most people, even in New York City, think that Mamdani is too extreme for that city.
Yeah.
John, over to the governor's race in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl-Sears appears to be closing the gap. Now within striking distance, less than 10 points behind Democratic candidate Abigail Spanberger. That's according to the latest numbers out of Real Clear Politics. John, is where Republican Glenn Youngkin delivered a huge upset to Democrats back in 2022, will history repeat itself?
Obviously that's very, very hard to say. We do know that Virginia has been known to grant surprises here and there, including Glenn Youngkin 40 years ago. When we see this race, though, there's really been very little movement. When it has tightened up before, it's gone back to the Democratic side. The Representative Spanberger holds, anywhere from a 5 to 7 point average lead. That's comfortable, but it's not enough. And we have seen last minute surprises in Virginia before, notably Ed Gillespie in 2018. So what I'd caution your viewers is to watch those results coming in. The early results will come in from the Washington, D.C. suburbs and will appear to give the Democrat a commanding lead. But it's those rural and central Virginia votes that'll come in later. I suspect we're talking a single-digit race, but I'm still going to wager a smaller bet on Spanberger winning this one.
Okay, well, let's get to the Attorney General's race. It's happening also in Virginia. This one really getting attention across the country because it has so much controversy in it. That Democrat candidate Jay Jones joking in a text message about killing a political opponent and his family. And of course, those text messages resurfaced just in time for the election. Dustin, what do you make of this? Can this guy really get elected based on what we saw in those text messages?
Well, unfortunately, in Virginia, of all the three races that we're talking about, it has the earliest early voting. So I've already voted in Virginia, and a lot of people have. So a lot of people were already voting before they knew about that situation. So it's definitely going to be closer than it should be. It's amazing to think of voting for someone who's ever said that. You would expect that Democrats in the state and from across the country would call on him to drop out and pull their endorsements, but they seem to have circled the wagons. I mean, they have Letitia James, who's now apparently a Virginian, and she's in Virginia right now. Maybe she could swap out and take it over. She has been Attorney General before, but seriously, it's having that race in some polling has flipped, and it's also having an impact on the governor's race. And Spanberger, in my opinion, hasn't handled it very well. So it's going to make that race closer. And if it is a single-digit race, as John said, and I think it will be, that is actually it portends well for Republicans going into the midterms.
Yeah. Let's switch over to the Garden State now, where it could be the year that deep blue New Jersey flips red, according to the latest poll from Real Clear Politics. It's practically a toss-up now between Republican candidate Jack Ciattarelli and Democrat Mickey Sherrill. John, where's this headed?
It's headed to a nail biter in a typical Jersey race, as it was 4 years ago, though unexpectedly 4 years ago. Very competitive, although both campaigns, are making some really dumb mistakes. I mean, Mickey Sherrill talking about who puts pork in meatballs in New Jersey, of all places. Not her finest hour. Meanwhile, Ciattarelli, refusing to condemn a Muslim advisor of his for making, blatantly anti-Semitic comments. It's a nail biter. This is going to be a close race. I still got to give the edge to the Democrat on this one, but I think we're looking at a 3-4 point race. Final analysis
should be close. All right, election day fast approaching. Thank you both for joining us today.
And thank you for all the folks there at Newsmax and Wake Up America. You can watch that show from 7 to 9 a.m. weekdays. And Charla and Mark, who's normally in, that was his birthday actually. They do a great job. And of course, John Zogby, a legendary pollster, and has had great insights as well. So let's move to the New York City race. So looking at New York City, this is currently what the Real Clear Politics average has us at. We've done a lot of polling on this. I will tell you that this is actually, for the Real Clear Politics average, this has gotten closer. Some of these polls are better than others, though I think the folks who are polling on this race, you'll notice it's all likely voters. It's not true in Virginia. People have registered voter polls, which is crazy to me that they're doing that a week out from the election. But looking at New York City here, 15.6%. So anyway, what is this? Why does this matter? So, Mamdani is the Democratic nominee for mayor. Obviously, there is a whole conversation about how he's a problematic candidate. And it's amazing, in one of the bluest cities in the country, that most people are talking about how do we stop the Democrat nominee. And that's something that I think is lost on people a little bit, partly because they're afraid of the number one financial center for the world, and then also for our country, having an avowed communist as mayor. So with this, I mean, he's going to win at this point. I don't think it's as foregone of conclusion as like 90%. Or whatever it is that Kalshi, if you know Kalshi, the prediction markets. By the way, if you are interested in prediction markets, you see right there, we have pollingclub.com, and you like to make bets on these sorts of things, that's a really good place to be, encouraging us to do surveys in places that you might want to place bets. But Mamdani recently was touting the Kalshi, which is one of the prediction markets, their odds, which is like 90% to 7% for Mamdani versus Cuomo. I think it's actually better than that. So if you put $100 bet on that, then you would, and Cuomo won. If you put $100 bet on Cuomo and Cuomo won, then you would be making like $1,100. So it's not likely at this point. However, I have seen internal polling that shows that Mamdani's definitely lost some of his momentum. You see that he's really not broken out from the mid 40s. Our polling made it very clear that 46% of New Yorkers believe that Mamdani was too extreme for New York City. And we haven't seen any, in my opinion, credible polling that has had him over 50%. And there hasn't been much, and he hasn't been there for very long. So I think that that is interesting to see that. Then you also have that in our polling, we tested different issues for all the different candidates. And one of the things that we found was for Mamdani's positions on defund the police, on refusing to denounce globalized intifada, which many find that to be an anti-Semitic phrase that is a call for violence against Jews. And he's refused to do that. And we're going to go into one of the issues I think is why maybe his momentum has been blunted here in a moment. But, all these things come together. And then, of course, his, government-owned grocery stores. Majorities of New Yorkers, even in blue New York, folks are not on board with what he's doing. I think people miss the opportunity. The best issue against Mamdani was defund the police, and they really haven't gone after him hard. Really, no one's gone after him hard. They talk about it on cable television, but honestly, I don't think that that's really that's not percolating to the regular folks. So I think what you're seeing with this race, you have the 5 stages of grief, and in this race, you have the 5 stages of the New York City mayoral race. Some people are still in denial as to where this is going. Some people are bargaining. People are still trying to get Curtis Sliwa out, which wouldn't have an impact. And then some people are at acceptance that this is just how it's going to go, and they're moving on with it. One of the things that's interesting on the ballot. So a lot of people are polling on this. One of the things that we can't really replicate in our polling is how the New York City ballot works. So it's a ballot that has candidates across like a kind of a landscape list, and you're going to have the 2 top party candidates. So that's Mamdani as the Democratic nominee, and you have Curtis Sliwa as the Republican nominee. They're going to be easy to see on your ballot. And then both of them have a second party line. This is an interesting thing that New York State does, where you can be on the ballot multiple times. And so you're going to have Mamdani under the Working Families Party and the Democrat Party. Then you have Sliwa, who's going to be on there with the Republican Party, but then also, I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's something like the Animal Rights Party or the Pro Animals Party. He's famous for his love of cats and rescue animals and whatnot. One of the funny comments that Trump made about him is that he was that Sliwa was going to turn Gracie Mansion into a haven for cats, and is going to have that place overrun with cats. Well, it's probably would have happened, but you have so both of them are on the ballot and they're easy to find. But then you have Cuomo, who's over here kind of on the other side of the ballot. He's under, I don't even know what they call the party, but it's independent line, and he's going to be harder to find. So most people are going to be able to do that if they're looking to vote for Cuomo. But at the margins, it's going to make a difference. So anyway, this race is interesting. The thing that I think is having an impact, though, ultimately is, I'll post this in the comments. And thank you. I see Tom made a great point about our weird ballots here in New York City. Absolutely. And hopefully you're figuring out who to vote for there. One thing that's interesting also for New Jersey and New York, that you see Democrats across the country pushing in swing states and competitive areas to have all mail ballots, have ballots, being voted in September. But in the blue Northeast, where Democrats pretty much have control of everything, they don't let you vote until about a week and a half out. So early voting just started last Saturday in New York City and in New Jersey. So people are really this, late breaking news in these races actually has an impact. And something that I think has had an impact is this whole there's this whole vibe with Mamdani that he doesn't he's only been a citizen for not even like half a decade, and he's pretty young. He doesn't really understand 9/11 and how that impacted the city. And there's a bunch of stories like this one here. Olivia Reingold, she's been covering the New York City mayor's race for the Free Press. Excellent coverage, in my opinion. And she also suggested questions for our surveys. But Mamdani praises Imam once on New York NYPD's terrorist watch list. This is one of the unindicted co-conspirators of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Is the fellow there on the right that he's pictured with, and this happened just, I think, two weeks ago that he was doing this. And then in the last few days, he made the comment about his aunt. It turned out to not be true. Some distant cousin who felt afraid to get on the subway after 9/11 because of the perception of discrimination. Now, for a lot of people that didn't strike them as struck them as tone deaf ultimately, because you have people who they lost their lives on that day. Obviously, it just doesn't really communicate well to the folks. So I think he's definitely hit a snag, and this is ultimately where I think you see some interesting things happening though now, with Democrats beginning to circle the wagons with Mamdani. We'll talk about the government shutdown later. Hakeem Jeffries just came out and endorsed Mamdani. Democrats, the No Kings events didn't really give them the oomph or the dopamine hit that they needed to have their base feel good about something. And I think they're looking to have a couple of wins next Tuesday. And New York City mayor, it's kind of silly that would be the one, but that's one of the reasons it's going to be the most likely. So Hakeem Jeffries got out in front of it, endorsed him. I think that's largely so that they can claim victory and we can move to reopening the government. So anyway, that's the New York City mayor's race. Now let's move over to New Jersey. And New Jersey is really surprising to folks how this has become such a competitive race. It was competitive 4 years ago, which was expected because it was the off-year election following a Democrat winning the presidency. So you'd expect that there'd be a bit of a swing. You'd have the fall of Afghanistan, as I said earlier. So that was understandable. But this year, following Donald Trump's victory last year and having a pretty robust and transformative presidency so far, which you expect people to react to, it is so interesting to see that even in public media surveys, which a lot of these aren't geared towards capturing all the demographics that they need to be as accurate as they should be. They have Mikey Sherrill, the Democrat, only up by 3.7. We've also seen New Jersey trending towards Republicans between the last two presidential elections. So this is something to watch. I don't know if he's going to be able to pull it off, if Chitterelli's going to be able to pull it off. You heard John Zogby talking about Mikey Sherrill's made some mistakes. He pointed out the questioning people putting pork in meatballs. Obviously, that is absurd in a state like New Jersey, where people know a lot about that. But she also has her own problems. She was asked not to walk with her graduating class because of honor and integrity issue. So she's got real problems. And it's interesting that we are this close, and it's really going to be. It's possible it could be even closer than that. So that's that state. I'm going to point out an article I think you should check out um, from Michael Barone, who is a legend. He wrote for years, wrote the Almanac for American Politics, obviously commentator on TV. He wrote for U.S. News and World Report, but he's one of the number one like demographic guys, and he has a great article on Real Clear Politics right now, the trends in New Jersey and Virginia, and I recommend people take a look at that because he breaks down what's happening with that. I'm going to post it in the comments. By the way, if you want to make a comment or question like Tom did, we will bring you into the conversation. But I just posted that article from Michael Barone where he talks about the trends in both of these states. Obviously, Virginia's been trending away from Republicans, but New Jersey has been trending towards Republicans. And Michael Barone does that. Interesting on Michael Barone, I first met him many years ago in 2001 as an intern at the White House in political affairs. And Karl Rove had brought Mr. Barone in to speak to the staff. And he's fascinating because he did the Almanac for American Politics for years, and he knew everything down to like your county, to every zip code. He knew everything. So he had this little parlor game that he would do. So when he meet you, he asked you what your hometown was. I told him Lyman, Colorado, and he said, "Oh, your area code's 719." So like it doesn't matter where you were from in the country, he could tell you some interesting little geographic knowledge like that because he knows so much about the country. Years later, he wrote an op-ed for U.S. News and World Report and touted one of our campaigns and how we were changing the game. I think it was a guy by the name of Oganowski, and we had this thing called Bloganowski. Blogs were a brand new thing, and he was highlighting how we were kind of changing the game using this new media, which seems so old at this point. But anyway, really interesting guy. I don't have too much more to say about New Jersey other than it is definitely defying gravity in this election cycle. Not sure if Republicans are going to win, but in all of these, what it looks like is Democrats could run the table and they're going to be muted and lower support than what you'd expect on that. I see a note here asking about is this playing out in other places? Yeah, so I think it's playing out in places like Virginia. So with that, I'm going to go to I was on Todd Stern's show on Newsmax 2. Todd has a radio show. You can check your local listings. Recommend you check it out. But we had a conversation focused on Virginia, which is probably the biggest of these. Both of these have a lot of money being spent in these races, but we really broke out what's going on in these Virginia races. Jeff Katz, who's a radio show host based out of Richmond, we got into some of the important issues that are going on in Virginia.
All right, joining me now is Jeff Katz, host of the Jeff Katz Show at WRVA in Richmond, Virginia, and Dustin Olson, a pollster for American Pulse Research and Polling. I want to get to you first, Katz. Your ear to the ground there. How do you think the Republicans are going to fare next week?
Well, I think we are very much in a competitive situation. The lead that Abigail Spanberger had over Winsome Sears as recently as 8 weeks ago was double digits. And now it is a 2 to 3 point race. The other races down ballot, Lieutenant Governor is a tie, and Attorney General actually now trending by a couple of points to the incumbent Attorney General, Republican Jason Miyares. But I will tell you, Todd, there's a brand new wrinkle in this, and that is that Virginia Democrats have called a special session of our state legislature. And they were able to do that because they are in control of both houses. They did not close out the session in the way that traditionally has been done. And so they have called the senators and the delegates back to Capitol Square. It starts today, and it will take Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears, who is the presiding officer of the state Senate, it will take her off the campaign trail for the next 5 days, and Election Day is 8 days away.
Well, sounds like some dirty tricks going on down there. Dustin, to you, what does this tell you? What are you looking for as a pollster as we head into the final stretch here?
Well, typically you'd see in the off-year elections right after a big presidential year, the party that's out of power in the White House would be doing really well in these off-year elections. And we're not actually seeing that this year. You would expect in a place like New York City and New Jersey and Virginia, all blue areas, that you would have the Democrats doing really well. In New York City, we have a majority of people talking about how they can stop the Democratic nominee. Mamdani is likely going to win, but he's not actually super popular. In New Jersey, we have the Republicans being close, and then the same thing now in Virginia. Now that Spanberger clip is just crazy to me because she could easily not get asked about this again just by denouncing the text and pulling her endorsement from Jones, yet she refuses to do that. So a lot of this has to do with her own actions, and it's having an impact not just in the AG's race, but in her race. Also, the lieutenant governor, that campaign is within a couple of points. And then to my colleague's point about the special session, this is amazing to see what they're doing because they're also taking all the Republican delegates who are in competitive races off the field. Either they choose to fight these gerrymandering efforts, or they go out there and they campaign in these waning days of the election. So it puts them all kind of in a tough bind.
Yep.
Jeff, to that point, do you think the voters there in Virginia are seeing through all of this, what the Democrats are doing with the dirty tricks?
I certainly hope so, but I can't guarantee anything. I don't know. I am very, very concerned, Todd. We know that the Democrats are fearful because they've brought in folks like Pete Buttigieg and Bill Nye, the pseudoscience guy, and Barack Obama coming in to campaign for Abigail Spanberger and the other Democrats. If you were massively ahead, you wouldn't be pulling this in the last couple of days. And again, this special session is just dirty tricks is a very kind description of it. The Democrats are very concerned. Their internal polling showing this is a much closer race than they are trying to project. Will Virginia voters see through it? I just don't know, Todd. I just don't know.
Yeah, Dustin, by the way, Jay Jones, let's take a look at some of the polling data there now trailing the Attorney General, the incumbent, Jason Miyares. Now, before the scandal broke, Jones led by 6 points. What's the deal in Virginia? It seems like they sort of have a Kansas problem where they swing back and forth between the two parties with really no logical explanation.
Yeah, well, the state has definitely become more blue and maybe purple, but it is true the House of Delegates has swung in like 3 of the 4 last election cycles. So that definitely is the case. And also one of the things I would say to what Jeff was saying is absolutely true. They're trying to gin up support. There seems to be some level of desperation. We've seen in California with Prop 50, that's Gavin Newsom's gerrymandering initiative, that started off not that strong, but now the yes side of that vote is over 50% and trending towards 60%, which means that it's likely going to pass at this point. And I think the Virginia Democrats would like a little bit of that magic because it's been very simple messaging: vote yes to stop Donald Trump. And in Virginia, I think they want a little bit of that magic. Just vote yes for the Democrat for delegate to be able to stop Trump. I think they're also looking for this to gin up support and get their vote out.
All right, fellas, going to be
Absolutely.
a lot of fun watching the races next week. Jeff Katz, the final word there.
Yeah, I think that is a very, very apt description of what's going on here. And it is a desire to undo, frankly, the will of the Virginia people. We just voted a few years back for a constitutional amendment that put in place a nonpartisan commission. 11 seats right now, 6-5 Democrat. If they get it back in control of the Democrats and in the legislature, it's probably going to be 9-2. It's just going to be outrageous.
Yep.
All right, Jeff Kantz, Dustin Olson. Guys, we're going to have to leave it there. Really appreciate you coming on Newsmax tonight. Thanks a lot, fellas.
Thank you for Todd Starnes and the crew there for his show. And you can check that out 5 p.m. again on Newsmax 2, or check your local listings for any of the his radio show across the country. I'm going to go now to what we see on the Real Clear Politics averages for Virginia. So, all right, so here we go. So the big deal, maybe I'll go to the AG's race. You know, we had this story that National Review broke earlier about probably about 3-4 weeks now ago, that Jay Jones had sent to a Republican colleague in the House of Delegates, that's what they call them in Virginia, delegates, not representatives, and had been talking about putting 2 bullets in the head of the Republican speaker. Just crazy stuff. And the other delegate begged him to stop, and then apparently called her and said, no, I'm serious about this, and only if people have any kind of pushback, experience tragedy, will they change their policies. And then he said, and if he could have the widow of the speaker hold their dying or dead children in their arms, that might change their views on various policies. Crazy, evil. I don't know if he's, I wouldn't say, I don't say anybody's evil all the time, but like that was an evil moment in his life. And it really was the moment that he cannot be trusted with high office. Now, the shocking thing is, as you can see here, it's possible that he could win. So right now, the Real Clear Politics averages have Miyares, who's the incumbent attorney general, at plus 3.3. That is, this has polls from earlier in the month in it still. Some of these have registered voters. You can see there that's registered voter as opposed to likely voters. That is ridiculous to have that in this day and age, a week out from the election. That is intended to change the results ultimately. So the race has definitely changed. Before that happened, Miyares was actually trailing Jay Jones. So now Miyares is ahead. But then you fast forward to the gubernatorial debate with Abigail Spanberger, who's refused to pull her endorsement of Jay Jones. She said that she denounced what he said, but she hasn't pulled her support, and she's not called for him to drop out. I mean, this is crazy. And she now has a controversy where one of her workers on her campaign was caught laughing about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And this is telling you what these people, what they're about. And it's changed that race as well. So the debate, there's not much that's going to happen from the gubernatorial debate that's going to have a lasting impact. However, there's a minute-long span in that debate where Abigail Spanberger pretends like Winsome Sears doesn't even exist. Winsome Earl Sears is asking Spanberger a question about the Jay Jones controversy, like, why wouldn't you pull your endorsement? Why wouldn't you call for him to drop out? And Spanberger just coldly stares off into the distance like no one's talking to her. It is really, really creepy. But there's a bone-chilling moment when she gets this creepy smirk on her face, like a devil took over and possessed her. It's just really creepy, and they've been running those ads on all of it. I mean, it's definitely changed the race. Now, as I said in that segment with Todd Starnes and also with Wake Up America, if this is kept to single digits, this was a double-digit race before Abigail Spanberger was winning it. People thought that the government shutdown would probably have an impact in this race. and it will. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. What's going on with the government shutdown and how I think they're ultimately waiting for the elections next Tuesday to be able to open the government again. It could happen with this. With the union, government workers union, coming out and saying the Democrats need to do the right thing and start voting to open the government. That could change it, but right now they're waiting for get a little dopamine hit. So if they can win by single digits in Virginia, that is what they're pushing for. But that race has changed again. This for the governor's race, they have two polls in here with registered voters as opposed to likely voters. I just that's not believable whatsoever. So anyway, that's where that race is right now. Interesting thing I want to mention in on AMAC, which is the Association of Mature American Citizens. There's an article by David Catrone who talks about the Democrat early voting disaster brewing in Virginia. So this is interesting how voting has changed. So again, this is not what you expect in the off-year election following a presidential election where Republicans won. You'd expect the opposite of this. So there's not party registration in the state for voters, or it's not been traditionally something that has been the case. So it's not as good of a way to understand who's who. But there are 11 congressional districts, 6 controlled by Democrats, 5 by Republicans. And when you look at those congressional districts, well, first off, early voting is up by 145%. And that's interesting. And the GOP leads in those congressional districts. So if you look at the Democrat congressional districts, which there's 6 of those, they are at 444,038 people that had voted early as of beginning of this week. And then the Republican districts, which is 5, again, it's fewer districts, it's at 454,521 votes cast. Now, could you have a big surge of Democrats over the weekend and on election day? Totally. I mean, I would expect that. But right now, it's just interesting that that's where things are at. And that shows that there is an enthusiasm gap. And something else that would be believable is that there was already an enthusiasm issue for the Democrats. Their popularity is really low. We talked about the article on Semaphore at the beginning, and David Weigel and the group called Welcome, and having 70% saying that the Democrats are out of touch, showing that the Democrat Party's popularity is at negative 24%. On and on. There's all of these issues that are going on that it's really interesting to see where things have ended up. So we could be seeing something happening there. I would still expect Democrats to win a couple of those races. But the interesting thing also, before any of this controversy happened, the lieutenant governor's race has been within 2 points in most polls. There's not an average for that because there's not many people polling on the lieutenant governor's race. But that one is possibly could be the closest of the night. So we could see an upset happen in Virginia, or we could see what we expect, which is Abigail Spanberger wins, but it's not by as much as people expected. You could see the lieutenant governor's race being a nail biter, and Miare's winning, but not by much. Though again, this is something you cannot take for granted. So one of the things I want to also point out, so there's the delegate races, and that's really important. One of the things that Republicans don't do as well as Democrats is making effort, like to support their candidacies. I love that people are watching right now. We have thousands across the different platforms, and thank you for checking this out. But really, you have to take some action. So I'm going to mention a few of the delegate races that are believed to be the most important. And the reason this is important, you have here at the end of the campaign, we talked about it with Todd and Jeff, that the Democrats called into a special session to vote on redistricting to change the lines in the state, which is poking the eye to the voters of Virginia who voted to have an independent approach to those districts, and so they're going to buck that. But the way it works actually is that they have to vote twice. The legislature has to vote twice, and they have to have an election for the legislature happen in between. So they're going to have a vote now, and then they're going to have a vote after the election and try to shoehorn it all into a short time span. So that's ultimately what they're doing. So they're trying to change the game for sure. And, that's the thing I think that Democrats could have a win in this election cycle is that they're very much focused on process and focused on changing the rules of the game, which changes the outcome, which what I mean by that is the redistricting. Changing the maps changes the outcome. So we have other states, one of our upcoming episodes will talk a lot more about redistricting, but you have, in this case, you have the Democrats in Virginia who are looking to eke out a couple more seats for Democrats in Virginia. Will that be successful? There's a lot that has to happen for that to be a possibility. But then you have moving to California, you have Prop 50, the Gavin Newsom gerrymandering initiative, which early on was just about 50% or so support for it. That's inched up to higher in the 50s. However, that is, when we do initiatives, we usually expect the polling needs to be close to 60% for the yes side to pass. However, the no side, the last polling I saw was in the high 30s to low 40s. That just means that there's a little bit too much of a gap there. If it was more like a 58-42 or a 55-45, that might mean that the no side wins. But I understand that there's still going to be constitutional issues if they do pass this redistricting or gerrymandering initiative in California, which has an independent commission, and that's how the voters have set it up to do it, to do redistricting in that state. So that is the issue there. I'm going to go stick on Virginia for just a second and just mention some of the races. So, there's a lot of Democrat organizations that are pouring money into these races across the country. Republicans just do not play at that level. And so some of the seats to watch or to help, you can go to WinRed, and that's one way you can help people out. It's winred.com. So District 21, Republican challenger Greg Gorham, Gorham, is someone to possibly donate to. District 22, Republican delegate Ian Lovejoy. District 30, Republican delegate Gary Higgins, Geary Higgins. And then District 65, Republican challenger Sean Steinway. And then District 73, Republican delegate Mark Early Jr., whose dad had run for governor 1,000 years ago. Anyway, those are some of the districts that are to watch and to help out with, and recommend that folks go and help them out. You can go to winred.com for that. So redistricting across the country, a couple of other places where that's important is Pennsylvania has retention races for the Supreme Court. A couple of years ago, this redistricting stuff has been going hot and heavy for about 15 years on the Democrat side. Barack Obama tapped his attorney general when he left office to take over the effort, and they really have eked out a lot of wins as far as redistricting and gerrymandering, which is one of the reasons why they're deathly afraid of Republicans taking it up now, because Republicans just haven't played that game to that level. Of course, everyone's pushing gerrymandering, but it's not been the same as the Democrats have. So there is more opportunities. So next week, if they pass this in California, and with what's happening in Virginia, you're going to see Indiana is a state that the governor is talking about it, the legislature there is talking about it. They're looking to go to redraw the lines, and they're going to be able to get a few more seats for Republicans. So if you play it all out, and if both sides play out full out to get the most seats they can possibly get, Republicans end up with 6 or more to the benefit of them in those races, and some estimate over that. So that's what's going on. I think that is intended for the midterm elections right now, and we're going to go into the government shutdown and moving into the midterms. The generic ballot is not as good as it should be for Democrats right now. So I'm going to move to that real quick. So 2026 generic congressional vote. Right now, Democrats are 2.4. At this point, back in 2017, Democrats were at plus 10. That's a big difference. And traditionally, Democrats have to be plus 3, plus 4 in order to be gaining seats in the House. Now, a lot of the gerrymandering efforts have changed that dynamic to some extent, but I really do think that you look at these numbers, you look at the unpopularity, you look at the Semaphore article and the report by Welcome. These are all indications that the party has a real problem. They're about to have the most prominent Democrat in the country be a Democratic socialist and the New York City mayor. So that's a big deal. So 2.4, this is why redistricting is important for Democrats. They need to change the math for them to be able to pull off winning the House. I see we have a question here. So don't forget that redistricting started this year because Democrats sued to force redistricting in Ohio, though it should backfire on Dems there. That's absolutely true. So there's been lawfare or legal challenges for the last few years in multiple places. And this is the stuff that the media just didn't cover that much back when these things were happening over the last few years, where they were really pushing to get everything they could on all these different maps. So that's a great point that Ohio was the start of all this. That is not included in the conversation at all by folks. Moving to so anyway, this is the generic ballot, and this is all important because now we're in the government shutdown. And I have an interesting clip here from Harry Enton, who's the data guy over at CNN, and he does a really great job of bringing the numbers to life and also pointing out things that most people would not have noticed otherwise.
Starting with Republicans, how has the shutdown seemed to have affected their political standing?
Yeah, you might think, given that the Republicans are in charge of both the House and the Senate, that a government shutdown might actually hurt the Republican brand. But in fact, it hasn't. If anything, it's been helped a little bit. Take a look here, the shift in net popularity versus pre-shutdown. When we're looking at the Republican Party overall, that brand actually up 2 points. That's within the margin of error, but clearly it hasn't dropped. Come over to this side of the screen. Look at the net approval ratings for Republicans in Congress. It's actually up 5 points since pre-shutdown. So what we're seeing here is the Republican brand in Congress has actually improved somewhat compared to where we were pre-shutdown, despite the fact that Republicans control. And that's the math that John Thune and Mike Johnson are looking at is, well, hey, why should we give, and electorally speaking, when our brand has actually improved a little bit?
Now, we say their position is getting better. With whom?
Yeah, okay, with whom? So I think it's two groups that it's so important to keep an eye out on. All right, changing the Republican Congress's net approval rating versus pre-shutdown. It's rallying the base for sure. Look at this. The net approval rating up 12 points versus pre-shutdown. But it's not just with the base. It's also with the middle of the electorate. Look at this. Among independents, it's up 8 points as well. So we've got a situation here where Republicans with the shutdown are actually rallying their base, but it's also something that's not hurting them with the folks in the middle. If anything, it's helping them with folks in the middle. And this is the type of math that if you're Republicans, you like to see, right? Because something could rally the base but alienate those in the middle, or something could rally those in the middle but alienate the base. But the truth is, we're not seeing that. What we're seeing is the Republican brand has actually gotten better among independents, and it's also gotten better among Republicans as well, that Republican brand when it comes to those in Congress. So again, What's the electoral reason that Republicans would give in at this point?
And Democrats, of course, they have their eyes on the midterm elections. Yeah, we have elections 1 week from today, but what Democrats in Congress are mostly focused on are 1 year and 1 week from today from the midterm. So how are they positioned right now?
Yeah, so, I mean, look, the generic congressional ballot, which traditionally Democrats have done really well on, and if you look at this point back when Trump was president the first time around, Democrats are up 11 points. Look at where it is now. Democrats are ahead, but they're actually only up 3 points. This is, in fact, the worst position Democrats have been on in a generic ballot at this point in midterm when there was a Republican president in the last 20 years. And this is no different from pre-shutdown. So Republicans aren't losing on this metric either. They become more popular, and they're actually in a pretty good position for them historically when it comes to the generic congressional ballot.
This is a concerning number for Democrats, would you say, in Congress?
This is a concerning number for Democrats because it's considerably worse than they traditionally do in midterm elections when there's a Republican president.
Harry Etten, thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend.
Well, there you have it. That's a good breakdown. It's actually at 2.4, at least in the Real Clear Politics right now. But that's a big deal for them, as I was saying. They have to be up 3 to 4% to be gaining seats, and that's where it's at. So, instead of hurting Republicans, the shutdown has helped, it seems, Republicans with their brand. As you saw, he talked about GOP brand up 2 points overall, +5 for congressional Republicans, +12 among Republicans, and +8 among independents. Now, one thing that's interesting, as I said, I think the Democrats have been fighting to have some sort of dopamine hit for their radical left-wing base, and they didn't get it with the No Kings. I think it was therapeutic for some of those old codgers that were out there, but it's not been what they needed, and it's possible that we'll see the government reopen before Tuesday. I'm a little bit skeptical, but it's possible with the federal government union. Workers, I do think that them coming out and saying Democrats need to vote for the clean CR and stop this nonsense, I think that will have an impact on them. But I do think they're trying to get to Wednesday for a couple of important reasons. There's a non-zero chance that a lot of these government furloughed workers, people who ultimately are going to get repaid at some point, they are using their time off right now to help in Virginia and New Jersey with get out the vote for the Democrats. It's nearly a guarantee that that's happening. So there's all that. I mentioned Hakeem Jeffries coming out earlier this week and endorsing Mamdani, the most likely win that they're going to get, and being able to claim victory from that and have something to show for their base. But you can see it's not really worked out well for them because their message has been fairly dishonest throughout this whole process. They simply say Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House, so it's all on them. That's obviously dishonest because it doesn't tell you how the process works. A lot of people do know, but not everybody does. It takes 60 votes in the Senate to be able to pass the continuing resolution. So they need 5 more Democrats than they currently have. That's a total of 7 to 8 Democrats that they need to be able to pull this off. Rand Paul has continually voted to keep the government shut, though I imagine if it was right on the bubble, he would probably join with the rest of the Republicans. But Republicans have consistently voted to keep it open. Democrats have consistently voted to close it, and their demand is $1.5 trillion in new spending to be able to reopen the government. That's crazy. There's been so much work to kind of bring the deficit into in some control, though that's not even done. That would blow that up, obviously. So this is untenable, and there really has not been an off ramp for the Democrats. So this is where I see things at right now with the government shutdown, and the Democrats are going to, I think, make it past the election for that to happen. I mean, they don't want to lose their GOTV volunteers for sure. So with that, ultimately, I think this is interesting. Democrats are going to have some wins next week. They're going to have also some, missed opportunities. And ultimately, we're going to see the real transformation of the party from the traditional Democrat Party to the one that's led by Zoran Mamdani, an avowed socialist, and that is going to be their out of this election. That's going to be the person who is going to be the most noticed, the most charismatic, the person who's driving the conversation the most, and that's something to be expected. Now, not long before the show, we'll see if this, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to make it work out, but CNN, we just showed Harry Hinton. They've invited me to be in studio the morning after the election in New York City to talk about all the elections, what's happened. So, be watching for that. It'll be early Wednesday morning next week to talk about what actually happened. My guess is that this is going to be a mixed bag. There are going to be some wins for the Democrats and some wins for Republicans. The wins that the Democrats will be muted. They're not going to be big wins like they should be in this year. So some media is going to tout whatever Democrats get as the biggest thing ever. If you see people talking about the Democratic nominee for mayor in New York City being the biggest win ever, that tells you that they don't have much. I think the biggest win they're going to have actually that matters is going to be the California Prop 50. And we're going to see what happens with Virginia. As someone who lives in Virginia, the idea of Jay Jones being the attorney general is disgusting to me. Abigail Spanberger is not much better. So, that's not something I'm looking forward to if they were to pull off narrow victories. But yeah, we'll see what happens with that. But ultimately, I think we're going to get a mixed bag for it, which is important because that's bucking the historic trend. So again, I'd like to encourage you to go to WinRed to help out these candidates. Help out Winsome Earl-Sears, help out Jason Miyares for Attorney General, also the Republican for Lieutenant Governor, whose name I forgot, but I did vote for. He's interesting, but he's within 2 points currently, so you can help him. And then these other delegate candidates, challenger Greg Gorham, Ian Lovejoy, Gary Higgins, challenger Sean Steinway, and then delegate Mark Early Jr. Those are some of the folks that would make sense to go and support here as we go into these waning days. So with that, thank you everybody for joining us. That's the show. Thank you for listening to Political Trade Secrets, watching us, checking us out here. Thank you for everybody who joined the live stream and posted questions. Really appreciate that. And if you'd like to know more about our polling and get insights directly to your inbox, please go to pollingclub.com. But the biggest way that you can help out with what we're doing here is to like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform that you enjoy this content on. If you want to join the live stream, go to any of our social media and click the little bell to get notified whenever we post something. But really do appreciate each and every one of you for being here today. And again, please do like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're watching. And I'm looking forward to talking to you about what happens in these elections after Tuesday, and then looking to the midterm elections, what to expect. And we'll be having a special episode just on redistricting here in the coming weeks, because this election is going to have a big impact on what happens there. It's crazy to think that it's happening in 2025, 2026, in the middle of the 10 years. These happen at the end of each decade. We go into the census and then redistricting, but this is the new game. If you can change the rules, then you can change the game, and that's been what we've been seeing for years now. And unfortunately, Republicans haven't played it as much, but now they're joining the fight, and it has Democrats scared. So thank you again, and we'll see you on the next Political Trade Secrets.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.